As I was thinking about this morning, and actually adding a few different pieces, a couple things started happening to me which are interesting, if you will, because I wasn't expecting it. I started tearing up. And not because I was remembering things from a dark, horrible perspective in my own life. But I was tearing up because I was remembering beautiful things that I wasn't paying attention to before. I walked in and I was sharing with Rose that I was looking at notes of when I first gave pieces of the presentation I'm giving today, that I haven't given in a long time, and I actually only give it amongst believers, only because believers don't ask the questions that most non-believers ask afterward, right? Believers know that what I'm talking about comes, and the healing that I encountered comes from the Holy Spirit. And I don't have to explain that, I don't have to defend that, it just is what it is. Even the Bible was a little bit misleading because it's more a story of what God has done. And I thought that I'd share that because I am a therapist now. But as I was reviewing all the different pieces of speeches that I've given in the past, all the way back to 2005, and I was looking at the notes and the things that I was saying, I was like, man, I was really traumatized. I was in a really dark place. I remember looking across just groups of people like this and just watching people shut down. And people don't shut down by like tearing up and gagging or ab reactions and walking out. They shut down by falling asleep. Right? You have to tell a joke and then they come back to life. A lot of them, you realize that and you're just sucking the life out of them. And that's what I was doing to people. I was just taking them down this horrible roller coaster into the ground. And it wasn't until much later, actually, that I started realizing that it's about being present, right? Just like Bessel van der Kolk says, that our job as therapists is to keep people here in their own skin. I remember I was driving back from the YMCA after picking up my now 8-year-old who was about 4. And that morning he had taken a cape to school with him. A cape that my mother, his grandmother, made for him. I remember that my grandmother had made a cape for me too. And I remember my first day of school taking it to kindergarten with me to show it off. As I picked my son up, he threw the cape at me from the back seat, hit me in the back of the head while I was driving. He's always been very expressive that way. And he said to me, "You lied to me." What do you mean? What happened? He's like, you didn't tell me I can't fly. And I'm like, "Buddy, what happened?" Well, Joaquin or whoever it was, I remember it was a J name, told me that I can't fly. And I was telling him that I can't fly, and that if I couldn't fly, that you would tell me I couldn't fly. So I was sitting there in the front seat, and I only have about a 2-mile drive back to my house from the YMCA on the east side of St. Paul. And I'm thinking, man, I remember this scene. I remember coming home from kindergarten, walking home the 2 blocks that felt like 2 miles that day because my cape failed. My cape, everybody told me I couldn't fly, and I remember walking into the kitchen, and all the brown cabinetry, and the table, Mom's sitting there, and she's making like a snack before dinner, and I threw the cape at the table. My grandmother was visiting, and she's like, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Well, you lied to me. You told me I could fly, and I can't fly." And as I'm sitting there driving, my son's just back there all cross-armed and quiet, and it's like we were beside ourselves. And then I remember saying to him, "Buddy, do you know what a superhero is?" "Yeah, it's somebody that can fly." A superhero is somebody that goes back and tells other people that they can fly. And you remind them every day that they can fly. That's what a superhero does. That's why we watch the movies, so that we remember that we can fly. That's what a superhero does. I mean, you have to have courage. You have to love people. You have to get them to realize that they're worthy of flying. So tomorrow I want you to wear that cape and I want you to tell people that they can fly. "Okay, Papa." And still to this day, he does that. I actually got called into his school one day because he was on a platform in the parking, in the recess playground telling people that they can fly. So I have a small tradition that I do mostly for myself, and it comes from just my own healing, and I like to introduce things by coming into poetry. Ever since I was little, my mother would help me with whatever I was experiencing through writing, and I found this beautiful writer, John O'Donohue, who was passed, and he has this beautiful blessing for presence. And so switch your microphone. this one better? Oh, yeah. It's definitely better. Thank you. So this is a blessing for presence. Awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. Have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. Receive encouragement when new frontiers beckon. Respond to the call of your gift and the courage to follow its path. Let the flame of anger free you of all falsity. May warmth of heart keep your presence aflame. May anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of soul. Take time to celebrate the quiet miracles that seek no attention. Be consoled in the secret symmetry of your soul, and may you experience each day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder. I now believe wholeheartedly that we all live in a traumatized world. And it didn't start yesterday. Well, and this depends on who you are. I was reading a book. I read one fiction book a year. I force myself to, right? And this year I read that book by Young, the same guy that wrote The Shack, but he wrote a book called Eve. An amazing book if you haven't read it. But anyway, in it he describes the fall. Right? He describes initially that, Adam and God are running around through the garden, and Adam's swinging from one tree to the other, just barely outrunning God. And of course, God's laughing behind him and playing like a father would, right? And they're sitting there, and Adam's leaning up against God on his lap and says, "Papa, you don't really need me to do anything, right?" "No, I don't." "So why do you have me naming all the plants and all the animals?" "Oh, because I love you." Later on, quite to the contrast of that, there's a scene where Adam and Eve have sinned. Right? They rebelled. And now Adam's doing everything in his power. He's anxious. He's running around. He's sacrificing animals because now man requires a sacrifice. He's coming up with things to wear, and he's trying to hide. And he's just all over the place, and he's frustrated, and he's just pinging everywhere. And God's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And Adam says, "Don't look at me. Just don't look at me." And he's like, "What's going on?" And it shows a picture of God chasing after Adam in a very different way. And Adam just turned away from God, and he saw his own shadow. Or he saw darkness. And he kept walking towards the edge of the garden. And there he was at the gates. And God said, "Don't do this. Don't do this. I can make this right." But Adam walked away. And as soon as he walked away, he realized what he had lost. He turns back in this fiction book. He turns back and he's looking at the garden. He's just screaming, banging on what he believes to be a wall, but there's nothing there anymore. He can't see it anymore. And he's just yelling and screaming, and Eve is looking out at him and saying, "What is going on? I want to go out to him." And God's like, "Don't do this. Don't do this." And then Eve eventually goes as well. And then since then, I think we've been experiencing that passed on trauma, that intergenerational trauma, from one person to the other, from one people that was sent out to rescue the whole world, but then they forgot that mission, and they pushed the whole world out. And one after another king that did another horrible thing to another person. One nation raises up against another nation. We forgot that it's all about bringing people into itself. It's our pride when we turned away. In our own profession, we talk about trauma as a disorder of avoidance, right? What are we avoiding? And there we have a picture of Adam avoiding responsibility, maybe. I don't know. Avoiding looking at God in the eyes. I don't know. Avoiding something for sure. He's walking away. He sees his own shadow. You can only see your shadow when you're not looking at the light. Avoidance. The DSM criterion has very specific pieces to avoidance to look for. Right? But I think more than anything, trauma is a psychic reorganizer of the planet around you, isn't it? I think about veterans that come back from war and they're on 94. We lose more veterans in Minnesota on 94 or to suicide than we do in combat. Right? And a lot of these things that happen on 94 are suicide. But there they are on 94, these bridges. I remember the first time that I came back from Iraq and I saw that 10 Bridges Road, I call it. It's right there by the Capitol. There's like 10 bridges that you have to come through, 35E heading north. And every single bridge in Iraq was a potential threat. Somebody could drop something on you, blow you up. So 10 bridges, and that's where you see a lot of people just kind of hold up. I saw a homeless guy once, and I kept looking at him, wondering what's he doing up there. But finally, my own anxiety got to me, and I had to go and ask him, "What exactly are you doing here?" Like, "I'm a veteran, man. I'm just keeping these bridges safe." well, I stopped worrying about the bridges. I think worse yet, the psychic reorganizer of the trauma gets you to believe that you're worthless. Your original worth is skewed. That worth given to you by the Creator, right, that put the little tag in the back of your neck that said, this is how much I believe you're worth, it's gone. Somebody tore the tag off. I'm going to ask you to sort of cooperate with me on this. I'm going to show you what I mean. And if you're an introvert like me, this is going to be a little bit dramatic. All right, so talk to Gene, grab a stress ball. There's going to be a couple more of these situations. But I'm going to ask you to listen to instructions first and then turn to a neighbor, right? Someone that you know or don't know, it doesn't matter. And I want you to look at them eye to eye and take turns eye to eye and say to that person, without averting your gaze if possible, or do whatever feels natural, but say to them, I am worthy. I am loved. I belong. And it's because of Jesus Christ and through Jesus Christ that I can tell you the truth. So if you can, find somebody and look at them. I am worthy. I am loved. I belong.
You guys do that, I'll do it, Catherine.
Oh, yeah. I am worthy. I am loved. I belong. I belong.
No.
I am worthy. I am loved. And I belong. Why is that?
I'm guessing that for some of you, that was too much. I'm guessing that for some of you that was more than you can bear, and for some of you didn't even do it. And I looked around and I looked especially for you. Blinding. This is what trauma looks like. But I'm guessing some of you didn't do this or couldn't do this, or maybe you had to do whatever you had to do to get through the moment, just to get through the moment. Right? It was too much. And even though maybe on the outside you had the facade going on that you could say that, you believe that, but something inside of you, that little part of you, right, said, no, it's not true. Just remember that. You could say that right now, but when you leave, remember it's not true. I'm willing to bet anything, but there's a few of you that did. I remember a mass experiment in this, and it wasn't actually an experiment, it was actually quite a sad event. It was that event on I-94. Do you remember when the protesters were on 94? Well, I was coming back from a really, really nice date with my wife. We enjoyed some tapas in Minneapolis, went to a show, that kind of a thing, and we were driving back, and we were hitting that 280 junction when everybody was being diverted. And it took long enough to get there to begin with, but as I got up to that junction, there were a bunch of police officers that were armoring up. Shields were coming out, helmets were coming out. I could tell that they were doing everything that I would do if I was going into combat, looking for where my ammo is, looking for where my gas canisters are, everything. And they're all talking, and there's the whoopee lights going on, and everything's getting ramped up, and everybody's wondering what's happening. And we got diverted up on University, and I needed to head east to head back to the east side of St. Paul, and I was driving with my wife in the passenger side. We were kind of worried because we went past the farmer's market, just on the south side of University Avenue in St. Paul, or where it would be, and there were all sorts of people that were starting to congregate there as well, but with signs that had nothing but hate written all over it. I still hadn't known what was going on. I wasn't listening to the radio or trying to pick up on anything that would tell us what's going on, but these were anti-protesters, or protesters against the protesters. I saw people that belonged to motorcycle clubs that I know that are white power, right? I saw signs that were talking about, all lives matter, not just Black Lives Matter. And I was confused about what was happening. Like, something bad is really getting ready to happen here. I mean, it wasn't just a couple hundred people. It was cars kept flooding in. And these were not police officers. Police officers were arming up. This group was arming up. I was wondering what was happening. And at one point, I looked at my wife and I said, look, if anything happens, use your maiden name. Okay, and then just get away from me as fast as possible. I'll get out of the car, you take the car, and then you get in the opposite direction as fast as possible. Okay? She's like, nothing's going to happen. What do you think's going to happen? I was getting triggered by things. I've seen this before. I know what this looks like. I've been in other countries where I've seen these mobs begin to pick up and the anxiety and the environment start to kind of kick up, right? I remember I tried cutting out of traffic to head over a bridge, and there were police officers, and I remember this police officer turned around and I saw his face, and this guy was dissociative. And he wasn't there. I could tell that he was there for action. He took the stance that told me, time to turn around. I was stuck. And my wife was like, oh my God, what's getting ready to happen? Like, I don't know. And I was praying. I don't know. The whole city was on edge, and everyone was preparing. Everyone was armed up. Everyone was traumatized. Everyone was dissociative. And I know what this looks like. The reason I know comes from what I like to say is a deep and personal understanding of trauma. A very personal journey for me. I'll begin to tell you about that journey, and I'll read poetry from time to time, right? It's more for me than for you, but I ask you to enter into this. This is another blessing, and this blessing is for suffering. May you be blessed in the holy names of those who, without knowing it, help to carry and lighten your pain. May you know serenity when you are called to enter the house of suffering. May a window of light always surprise you. May you be granted the wisdom to avoid false resistance. When suffering knocks on the door of your life, may you glimpse into its eventual gifts. May you be able to receive the fruits of suffering, and may memory bless and protect you with the hard-earned light of past travail, to remind you that you have survived before, and though the darkness is now deep, you will soon see approaching light. May the grace of time heal your wounds. May you know that though the storm may rage, not a hair of your head will be harmed. See, I know quite a bit about suffering. I say a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I was raised in a Roman Catholic tradition where we learned all about suffering as a kid. We get to go to Latin Mass, right? Not understand a thing that's going on. The priest has his back turned away from you, and my father, right, he's all pious and stuff, and he's really into this. And I'm like, he doesn't speak Latin, you know? I know he doesn't understand what's going on. My favorite part was while the priest was turned away and he had like the host in one hand and the wine in the other, I swore he said hocus pocus. Right? I mean, it sounds like it. When you go through, and I've now gone back through and looked at the liturgy and then the whole ceremony, I realized that it sounds like hocus pocus if you say that. But to a little kid, it was hocus pocus. I'm like, that's what turned it into wine. I mean, that's what turned it into blood in the body. No what? Oh, I got it. And I'd always giggle. You know, he'd say hocus pocus, and I was like, you know? And there's my father's hand in the back of the head because I wasn't being pious enough, right? I'd get into trouble with this priest. The priest who did the Mass, he only spoke Italian and Latin, right? And I spoke Spanish and English, right? And just a little bit of French around my grandmother, but not Latin and not Italian. And I remember getting into trouble with this priest often. This is, as far as I knew, he never understood a thing I said, but my father wanted me to go to confession with him because he's the one that came from Rome. He's closest to the Papa, you know what I mean? I was like, okay. So I knew that confession had a price, though. And I figured that after a couple times of doing this confession, because I talk a lot for confession, as an introvert, it's either here where everybody's kind of like a blur and I'll catch a couple people here and there, right? Or it's one-on-one and we go deep. Let's go deep, right? I'm not going to waste your time. Let's just go deep. Let's make it worth every single penny. And I was in this, and I just kept asking questions, and I was always very inquisitive. And after every one of my confessions, it became like, you know, 1 rosary at first, 3 rosaries after that, 5 rosaries. I was like, what am I asking that's so raw, you know? And my father would then have to go in right after me, and then he'd come out, he'd sit down and look at me, give me that stink eye, and I'm like, here we go. He's faster at the rosary, I'll just take my time. He's not going to stop me from doing the rosary. And when I'm done with the rosary and building up all that anxiety, knowing I'm going to have to get in a car, because going home was very painful, I knew that whatever he and Father Dominique talked about, when I got home, I'd get punished for it. Severely punished for it. Right? Asking questions was dangerous. Really dangerous. I remember, though, that I had my little, alternate rebellions going on, my little private victories. My brother was an altar boy. My brother didn't ask questions. He just did what he was told. He was younger, right? But he was an altar boy. And then he would go and try to touch the bells, right, when he wasn't supposed to. And Father Dominic would just about lose it. And my brother would say he would turn all red, and he would actually pass gas. So he would do that for me. He would go and it looked like he was touching the bells, and then he'd stop. Father Dominic would be passing gas, It was amazing. So it was my little private victory, my little, prisoner of war, get through this thing. But I remember that there was another priest that came to visit, and he was a Jesuit priest. Everybody was mesmerized by this Jesuit priest. He wore a tunic. He must have been either in his late 20s or early 30s. I would say early 30s based on at least how I perceived him. I remember his name was Father Pat. Long, red hair, big, bushy, neatly trimmed red beard, greenest eyes you ever saw, and I'd look at him from the distance, and I thought, this is Jesus. This is Jesus, He wore the tunic, and, just the collar, and it was all Jesuit, And I would just stare at him, and then, just wonder what he would do if I asked him questions. And once in a while, Father Pat would look over at me, I'd turn away, I'd go do something else, and I'd still come around, and I'd sit there, and I'd watch how he was with everybody, and everybody loved coming up to him. He laughed a lot, all the time it seemed. And he had a great laugh, a really deep, deep laugh. And I was just mesmerized by him. One day, it was already after confirmation, and I got confirmed a year early because my parents wanted to be one confirmation, my brother and I. So I was still a little bit young. It was one day, I was just kind of standing there, probably daydreaming like I used to, and he cornered me. There he was, right in front of me. Father Pat, beautiful green eyes, right? A little bit taller than me, amazing presence about him. He had all the vibes going on. And he looked at me, he's like, so you're the Hector that scares Father Dominic so much. I was like, oh, here we go. I was like, oh, I really don't do this. And he's like, what is it that scares him so much? You ask questions, he says, and he doesn't understand your questions. Would you share your questions with me? And yeah, I had a lot of them. And so I started with them, mostly the simple ones. Things like, what will God be doing when I find him? How far do I have to go to find him? Will he be dancing, or will he be waiting? Or will he be dancing, waiting for me to join him, or will he be warring? Will he have fire in his eyes with golden armor and swords, and is he coming at me because his wrath is upon me? Or will he be waiting for me to come onto the dance floor to dance with me? Will he be healing people or slaying them? Will I be slain by him or loved by him? Does he really love me, of all people, me? Or does he expect me to work for that unconditional love? Will he be laughing or crying? Will he be like my dad or like a good dad? Will I find him among the homeless or the rich? When I meet him, will he be bothered by me? Or will he welcome me? Does he really like this country more than others? Can he like the country that I come from also? Can he like the people there? Does he care if I hurt? Does he care at all if anyone hurts? Am I good enough for him as I am, or do I have to jump through more sacraments, rites, and hoops to be enough? I wasn't paying attention as I drifted into my imagination. Literally, I would drift into my imagination. It was a safe place to go. I had a habit of thinking questions through to the point where I would literally see like a screen of blue. Have you ever done that? Where you just kind of sit in and poof, the blue screen hits you like, oh, where am I? Right? That was my habit. And I remember that it snapped me out of it because I heard him laughing, and I was like, great. One priest tells my dad to take me home and beat me. This one laughs at me. I'm like, oh, can I just get a beating, please? And then I remember that he put his hands in my face, and he kind of knelt down to my eyesight, my level, and he started laughing and calmed down a little bit. He's like, my son, my beautiful son. And I look in those green eyes, and I remember him saying, our daddy in heaven is so happy that you're asking these questions. But the truth is, son, that we're going to have to go and get them answered. And when you go get them answered, you will suffer. They will bring you to places where you will see suffering, and you will suffer alongside those who are suffering. But your answers will be given to you. And they'll be every bit worth it. Now go. And then I looked at him, I'm like, when you say go, I don't think you understand, I'm confirmed, dude, I can run. I don't have to ever come back. And he's like, run. I'm like, I'm not coming back, Father Pat, I'm not seeing you again. Run. And I did. And that led me into many, many different places in my life where I did see all the different things that he told me I'd see. This is important because he was right. My questions took me into a lot of places on this planet, mostly to the military. I figured that at the age of 17 years old, that's how I'm going to serve. The little story or myth that my grandmother was spreading before she passed away was that when she taught me how to pray, that she said that all of a sudden this kid just, chimes up. And Hector said, well, God, when you put your hand upon the earth, may I be at your fingertips. I don't know if I actually said that at the age of 4 or 5. I'm sure that my grandmother believed that I was capable of that. Maybe I did. But I did always believe that I was going to serve. And I didn't know any other way to serve. And at the age of 17, military is a really easy way to go in and serve. I mean, they wanted you, right? You don't have a prefrontal cortex that's fully developed yet. Just do whatever. I'll jump out of airplanes. Dude, what? I'm going to do what? I'll do that. I was all over it. And I remember walking into my recruiter's office, and when I walked in, they looked at me, and they're like, hey, how can we help you? I'm like, I'm looking for somebody with a distinguished unit insignia in the 75th Ranger Regiment. Somebody who already knows the Ranger Creed, somebody who's been in the Ranger Regiment. That's the only recruiter I want. And I went through a few of them. They're like, kid, who are you? And they walked me out the door. See, for me, it wasn't that they were looking for a new employee. I was looking for the right person to lead me into this, right? I already knew the Ranger Creed by heart, right? And at the ripe old age of 17 years old, I knew what it meant, right? Recognizing that I volunteered as a Ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. I'll always endeavor to pull the prestige, honor, and high spirit of my Ranger Regiment. And it goes on, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession at 17. It's a traumatic event for me to join the military. I wanted my recruiter, I finally found a recruiter, Sergeant Jarrell. I'll never forget it. When I told him that I knew the Ranger Creed, I walked up to him, I looked at his uniform like, you're the guy that I want to bring me into the military. Well, what do you know? And I told him all about the Ranger history, everything that I had read. He about fell out of his chair. We never even talked about pay. We just, let's fill this paperwork out. How old are you, kid? Actually, I'm going to be 17 in a few days. This is going to be my birthday present. I'll be at your house. We'll sign it. Your mom's on board. Oh, yeah, my mom's on board. Well, I didn't tell my mom that she's on board. And Sergeant Jarrell, I remember looking at, from the second story apartment that we had, looking, he comes in his car, I'm like, here we go. And I just kind of sat on the couch looking at a magazine, and somebody knocks on the door, I'm like, Mom, I wonder who that is. And I go and I open the door, and Sergeant Jarrell smiles, you ready, Ranger? I'm like, I'm ready, Sergeant. Mom, it's my birthday, right? And Sergeant Jarrell's like, what are you asking her that for? And she's like, yeah. Well, my birthday present just came. And then he walks in the door, and he looks at me, he's like, I'm going to kill you. And my mom broke down crying. We came from a country called Guatemala, and we left because of civil war. Oh, your friends are over here. we left because of civil war. And so my family had already seen what war can do, and when we were leaving, my grandmother said to my mother, don't give them automatic citizenship when you get there, because you got to be allowed to give them automatic citizenship. My mother's like, why not? And she said, well, because the United States sends its young men to war. The Vietnam War was ending. And so I didn't get automatic citizenship. My mother then signed the paperwork thinking that they'll just let me out. She never even told me that I wasn't a citizen. I just assumed I was a citizen. I didn't know that I had a green card. I didn't know that I was a resident. I didn't even register for selective service. I mean, just all sorts of weird things that just now, when I look back, I'm like, wow, my mom had been planning this the whole time. And she thought that they'd just let me out, but all it did was it expedited my citizenship, especially because the Gulf War was just beginning. And then I think about what happened after that. My military service allowed me to witness the wonders and beauty of the world. I'll be honest with you, it was beautiful. I had a lot of amazing opportunities. I was aboard an aircraft carrier when a pod of dolphins was swimming next to us, and look, there was this phosphorescent glow wherever they came in and out of the water. It's like they were glowing creatures. Have you ever seen that? They actually glow somehow. And just looking out across the water and how calm it was on this aircraft carrier where we were, and looking at everything else, the stars and the moon, and we were just like, man, this is why sailors go out to sea. I've gazed upon sunsets sinking behind snow-capped mountains overlooking triple canopy jungles in South America, just blown away that these two are coexisting like that. I've touched the Great Pyramids and pondered the significance of the Sphinx. while sitting on camelback. And at that age of 19, I was like, I still don't get it. I've witnessed people pull together in refugee camps, consoling each other, and rising above war in order to establish a new way of life where love might exist and feuds of old might dissipate through dialogue and through mutual strife. I've protected holy lands. I've actually walked in places where nobody else will ever walk. And the only point for me being in that valley was to protect it so that nobody else came in and destroyed it. I've played with children in streets that we just secured. I've kicked soccer balls with children who might not ever remember me, but will not forget that it was an American soldier that was kind to them. I've held the hands of toddlers. I remember this one little toddler, she had these little Egyptian beads on in her hair. She must have been like 2 or 3, was fully armored up. You know, the knuckles on the gloves and everything, the sunglasses, I mean, fully armored up. And she comes up to me and she grabs my pinky and she leads me over to the front door of her house and introduces me to her mom as her friend. I've gotten to experience those kinds of things. I've broken bread with peoples of every walk of life and learned the impressive histories of families, of nations, of countries. I've sat at the feet of elders discussing universal beliefs and thinking what it means to live on this planet together. I've experienced the racing of lines on a map. I remember flying from Germany in a Hungarian helicopter across through the Czech Republic and all the other Eastern Bloc countries and looking at those little pillboxes and asking the Hungarian crew chief, what is that all about? Oh, well, that was placed there to keep us out. Well, where did the line get drawn? Yeah, man, I don't know. The more I fly, the less I see lines. And I watched them disappear. I've been there for that. I've joined in the liberation of others alongside heroes of other countries. But my military service has also taken me into the underbelly of the world. I was once asked before speaking at a local church to not be gory about my experience. The words weren't hard to come by as I described where I've been. I told them that my path took me to the choicest places of hell and earth. I witnessed the evil of mankind and spit bullets into the legions of hell and fought against powers and principalities of the world, both in a very physical and spiritual sense. I've seen the pain in the eyes of mothers and the youth of nations at the realization that their fathers were gone forever. And maybe I was responsible for that. I've wept as I held the bodies of children, and raged as I witnessed the dehumanization of my brothers and sisters on this planet. I've witnessed as innocent blood stood in a gap between colliding forces so that maybe today, maybe just for one day, nobody would fall, and there would be peace, at least for now. But then died nevertheless. I've looked into the eyes of sociopaths and saints. I felt the seduction of evil and the overwhelming power of the Holy One. See, I served in the military for 18 years, 57 countries later, 13 deployments, 13 buried friends, hundreds of fallen warriors, and thousands of fallen innocents. I saw firsthand the underbelly of the world. I remember my first encounter with trauma. It was a Ranger buddy of mine. And he was the kind of guy that everybody looked up to. Right? Whenever I saw this Ranger, I was like, that's the guy. That's what I'm going to be like. You knew that when everything hit the fan, that's the guy that you wanted to be around. You wanted to be trained by him. You wanted to emulate him. He was a poster child for the Ranger Regiment. If it wasn't for all the scars on his face, he would be the poster child. Right? I mean, he was a fighter. He was a warrior. He had every badge, every tab, every award that you could possibly name. He had a combat scroll from Panama, and he was in Grenada. The guy was everywhere. The problem was that you knew that although you wanted to be trained by him, and you wanted to be like him in combat, you didn't want to be around him when we weren't in combat. He was just ornery, right? I mean, he didn't even drink anymore after a while, and he was still ornery. And he was ordered not to drink anymore because whenever he would drink, just bars would be cleared out. And there would be this Ranger that just gone ape, right? Just kind of frothing at the mouth, not realizing what he had done. I watched him hit a parking meter once until he knocked it off of its base. I was like, man. And of course, at that age, being a little bit scared, but being a Ranger, the mob mentality was like, okay, that's cool. Right on. I could do that, but I don't want to. And we were scared of him. Although we wanted to be like him. We went on a mission where it was a pretty intense mission. But I would say that out of all the missions that I've been with him, it was not as intense as those. Something was different though. Usually when you come back from a deployment, you get 4 days. Usually it takes like 72 hours. They debrief you, they take your ammunition away, they give you food and all sorts of things. And then they send you off for 4 days and a pass. And after the 4 days, everybody's excited to come back and tell all the stories, right? Oh, you remember this, you remember that, not just from the deployment, but then from what you just did in the 4 days. Except he wasn't back, which is really weird, right? I mean, Rangers don't miss formation. I mean, nobody got leave that we know of. Maybe he got leave. But nobody wanted to say anything because he was a leader. Everybody looked up to him. And so we're just kind of counting the days as they go by. Man, please don't hit day number 30. Because at day number 30, or you become a fugitive. They lock up your wall locker, they take inventory of what's in there, and they issue a warrant. You're a federal fugitive. You're a deserter. You're AWOL. And I remember counting the days, and it hit day number 30, and finally we asked. I remember asking Sergeant Robert A. Coco, who's also passed away, "Hey, Sergeant, where's so-and-so?" "You guys don't know?" "No." Kind of a weird question to my question, but no, we don't know. "Well, he's over on the 4th floor, over in Winn Army Community Hospital." What? We were stationed in Savannah, Georgia. 60 miles away was this place called Fort Stewart, Georgia. And we called it LEG land. LEG stood for Low Energy Ground Soldier. Rangers only needed to go there if we needed to buy something from their base exchange, or needed to take a piece of equipment in because they had the third shop, or whatever place that you needed to take whatever it was to. And whenever we had to go over there, we had to wear our best uniform, so that Rangers stood out. And we tried not to talk to anybody. We tried not to even shake hands with anybody. It was a proper salute, render all customs and courtesies, and then leave as soon as you can so that you don't get whatever infection might be at Fort Stewart, Georgia. And I remember asking Sergeant Robert E. Coco, "Well, can we go get him? Can we go visit him?" "Yeah, you guys take a government vehicle and go visit him. And while you're at it, do me a favor." "Yeah, sure, whatever." "Figure out what's going on inside his head." "Got it. Easy mission." So me and my buddy, we get in this vehicle a couple days later, and we're driving to Fort Stewart, Georgia, 60 miles. And we get into the hospital. We called ahead, of course, to say that we're coming. We get into the hospital. The nurse greets us, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm impressed that you guys actually even came from one of your own." So 2 problems with what she just said. Problem number 1, she's insinuating that we'd actually leave one of our own to fall into the hands of the enemy. Second problem, she's insinuating that there have been others that have come here from my Ranger regiment. You Rangers don't break. Rangers don't have mental health issues. Rangers are tough. I mean, our Ranger creed says that we'll always keep myself mentally strong, morally straight. What happened here, especially with this Ranger? And I remember she took us up into this room, and the room was beautifully lit. All sorts of sunlight coming in, paint that seemed to reflect the sunlight everywhere in the room. There were plants everywhere, cards everywhere. I mean, this guy was loved. We were like, "Hey man, what's going on?" He's sitting there in this seat, looking out the window, and we thought maybe he was just taking in the honeysuckle that was being blown into that warm, Georgia air. No, it wasn't that. He wasn't even paying attention to the fact that we came in his room. He's just staring off into who knows where. It was like, in fact, the only dark thing in the room was him and whatever was going on with him. And it gave us that creepy feeling like something's just not right with him. Right? He wasn't present. And so we're sitting there asking him silly questions at first. "So, you got a favorite nurse yet? What's the bed like? Do you mind if I check out the bed? Oh my gosh, this bed is better than at the barracks. What's the food like? So what do you do day to day? Do they take you on walks? Trying to be sarcastic." And he didn't respond to anything. So for about half an hour, we just kind of sat there with him. And then finally, my buddy asked, "So, hey man, we got to go soon, but we're just wondering, what's going on inside your head?" That's when he looked at us. With those snake eyes, we used to call it, just howl, just felt like it was ripping through us. Like there was no human there, just a presence. And he said, "You want to know what's going on inside my head?" And the voice, I remember forever, right? It was creepy. It was sad. It was depressed. It was like, I've never been in a place like that. And we just kind of nodded. And he's like, "My head is a place where butterflies cry, and I can't stop their screaming. You really want to know what's going on inside my head?" We're just kind of taken aback by that. "No, man, it's cool. Hey, we'll come back in a week or so, all right?" And we never went back.
Never went back. I never saw him again. And I remember the drive home was very quiet. When we got back to the barracks, Sergeant Cope was like, so what's it like? How's he doing? And my buddy was like, yeah, it's just bad juju, Sergeant. I don't want to talk about it. Oh, if it's bad juju, don't bring it around here. And that just meant whatever it is, we don't need that kind of stuff in our unit. We need to stay mentally fit, right? I don't want to hear about it. It's negative stuff. I don't want to talk about it. And that was our motto. It wasn't sua sponte of their own accord. It was, I don't want to talk about it. And it wasn't soon after that when I experienced my own stuff. I very quickly became Sergeant Matty, Ranger Matty, right? I remember people would say, there's Sergeant Matt. If you want to get trained right, that guy's going to train you. And I trained thousands to deploy. I created some of the most realistic training environments and put people through some of the most rigorous training you could possibly go and survive and win in combat. Right? And I've been there many times. I've taken units over. I'd take them over there and I'd bring them back. Usually I'd lose 1 or 2 people. And it was just a constant flow. And you wanted to be trained by Sergeant Matty, but there's a problem, see? Sergeant Matty, for as good of a trainer as he was, Ranger Matt had a dark side to him. Something just wasn't right. You didn't want to go out in public with him. What you wanted to do with Sergeant Matt, and they even gave me an office and painted the rim red, right? We put this little sign and it said, in case of emergency, break glass. That was what you wanted Sergeant Matt for. Ranger Matt was, in case of emergency, break glass. And I'm going to share with you some of those events that led to me being that same Sergeant Matt that then became the place where butterflies cry, and you couldn't make the screaming stop. If there's one of those times that if you want a stress ball, you pull it out now, right? And remember that there's Gene in that other room. But I think that it's important for you to hear this, not because you're a therapist or because of anything else, it's because I'm standing here in front of you, right? And I'm a therapist now. And I have people to vouch for how I lead as a therapist and how I am in my own healing and where I've gone to get to that healing and the different things that I've done. It's not as a traumatized individual that needs healing or service or anything like that. I'm not asking you to be my container. I'm asking you to understand that it's possible to be standing here in front of a group like you and share this. Right? And that because somebody had trauma doesn't mean that they were too weak to handle it. Right? And I should also say after that comment that I'm apolitical. I belong to the kingdom and I'm a soldier for the kingdom. And when governments fail, I will still be a soldier for the kingdom. Amen. So, I'm not reliving anything of the past today. I'm a psychotherapist and I'm able to jump into the fray with other people who might be stuck in their past. My military service has also taken me to the darkest places on earth where I have done dark things. Even my children, though they don't know the details, have a sense of where I've been and what I've done. In 2011, my wife was traveling overseas, and I was at home with the boys. And I have 5 sons, which can be traumatic in itself. And so if I twitch, it's just because whatever. But my teenage son was helping with my, at the time, 2-year-old son, putting him in bed. And the baby monitor was on as I was coming home late, taking the sport jacket off, and I was listening to the baby monitor when the little one said, "Tavo, I'm afraid of the dark." And then Tavo, who's my oldest, said, "Why are you afraid of the dark?" "Well, I don't know." And there was a pause. And then, in a not so obvious second engagement to the little one, he says, "Well, are you afraid of Papa?" "No, I'm not afraid of Papa." "Well, if you're not afraid of Papa, then you don't need to be afraid of the dark." "Why not?" "Well, because Papa was the reason why other kids in other countries are afraid of the dark. And he's on your side. So you don't have to be afraid of the dark." So even my teen understood it, although he wasn't able to put it in any words, but then my 2-year-old got it, right? I've been that which my own children might fear if they were children in another country. I've served in the capacity of both deliverer and executioner, both safety and threat. And my thoughts used to take me back to places where horrible and unforgettable memories used to live. I say used to, because even as I read through these, I'm like, man, was that really me? Did I experience that? I have memories of it, and as I read this, I'm like, man, poor guy. Now I think back to one of my first combat missions with the Ranger Regiment as we parachuted into a country west of Egypt. And the unit my unit came under heavy fire. We weren't supposed to come under heavy fire, we were told. But somehow, somewhere along the line, information gets leaked, and there we were. And I remember watching the tracers come up, and then thinking, well, this is a bad day. And I began to run towards our assembly area, and I linked up with a buddy of mine. His name was Bert, B-Y-R-D, and I remember he and I linked up, and we started running towards the assembly area, and it's pretty typical. 70% of your forces collect at the assembly area, then you move out and accomplish your mission. And I got to the assembly area, got to the choke point, they're like, hey, what's he doing out there? I look back, and Bert's on the ground. And around him, you could see the little, dirt spitting up, the sand spitting up, and you could tell he's taking fire, but he's returning fire. And there was a full moon. It was supposed to be a show of force jump, so we wanted it to be a full moon so that we can just fill the sky with parachutes. It'd be as scary as possible. But there was this glistening around him. I'm like, man, that's not a good sign. I mean, there's no wetness out here in the desert. So I ran back out there, and I remember as I ran back out there that the glistening was obviously him bleeding from the leg. And he was firing back, and I grabbed him from the back of his load-bearing equipment vest, and I started dragging him what felt like a football field, but it was probably only like 20, 25 meters. And as I pulled him back in, I grabbed him, put him in my lap. And I remember the medic saying, okay, treat for shock, because he's going down. So treat for shock. He's in my lap. I start taking his helmet off. Right? And as I'm holding him, he looks up and says, thanks, Matty. And then his head explodes. And I remember nothing else after that. And for a long time, I couldn't eat pork or be around a place where they were cooking pork on a grill because I could taste his brain in my mouth. Not that I want you to experience that, but that's what human brain tastes like, pork. I also think back to a recon mission in Kosovo. I was part of the Supreme Allied Commanders for the European forces and NATO doing reconnaissance missions to come back and deliver what would then later be the evidence that led to Milosevic's demise. And I personally became the eyes and ears, along with about 40 other individuals, for the kinds of things that were happening, atrocities. We were documenting, even videotaping, all sorts of things. And we were authorized to conduct sniper-type missions so long as it didn't compromise us. Our mission was mostly to go and observe. There was one specific mission where I remember being on top of the hilltop with these guys, and we were watching about 120 individuals, armed individuals, coming into the northern side of this town. And a woman that came around the side of these little shanties, if you will, like aluminum hooches and stuff, holding a baby, and we could tell that she was covering the baby's mouth. The baby must have been crying. And she came and ducked into a hooch when 3 men came around the same corner, and we thought she had made it. I started telling my sniper weapon systems to go ahead and start spotting for targets. The team leader said, we will not engage these targets. And we got clear shots, and nobody will know that we shot them. When 3 people are missing, somebody's going to know. So there's a little argument on top of this hilltop. And I did not outrank the team commander. So we put the weapon systems down and we observed through the spotter scopes and the binoculars as the woman who was now inside this little hooch, right, hiding with her baby, was then pulled out by 3 men who obviously knew where she went. They pulled the baby out of her hands, shot it, put it back into her arms, pushed her back inside the hooch. They all went inside, and the next thing we saw was a half-naked body going across the window. I remember getting on those helicopters that day, just wondering what the heck I'm doing. What's the point of this? On another mission in Al Anbar province, my unit was providing security for Iraqi police as they were handing out candy to children. And it was a great day. I mean, the Iraqi police were now in charge. We had succeeded in this mission. We were on the outskirts. A couple of us were walking in the middle. I was the first sergeant, so I walked with the chief. All the candy was being handed out, and then happy day, right? So we're walking back to this place called Camp Cooley when a huge explosion rocked us to the floor. I mean, we didn't even hear the explosion before we were already being thrown. We were pretty far away already, a couple football fields away. And we still got rocked. And I remember getting up, and I started thinking, okay, I've been in enough of these situations. Some of these guys have never seen anything like this, so I sprinted fast as they could. And as I was coming up, I started looking around me to see if I could find anything that tells me anything about what happened other than an explosion. And I remember seeing a tiny little hand holding a piece of candy, not attached to anybody anywhere else. On another mission, my convoy was hit by an IED. And I remember being in the third vehicle as the front vehicle disappeared in a plume of smoke. And I realized that there was 3 of my men in there. I got out of the vehicle like you're not supposed to do. I slammed the vehicle door and I started sprinting towards that vehicle and yelling commands at people who can't hear me anyway because, the explosion took out all our hearing and equilibrium. And my experience from previous deployments told me these guys are dead. The front of the vehicle looked like that little, string cheese that little kids eat, just ripped, gnarly. And I opened a door, and I remember not seeing the gunner in the gunner position, and I opened the door and I remember seeing the driver humped over the steering wheel with part of his eye protection missing. Across to the other side, the passenger was unconscious, and the whole window was covered with this dark stuff that I believed to be blood. The gunner was in this really, really strange position. I couldn't imagine that his back survived. I thought they were all dead. Now I started thinking, okay, now how do I prepare the rest of my unit for 3 of their friends being dead? But what was different was that they got out. They weren't shot. First Sergeant, what just happened? I'm like, whoa. Everybody else, it was continue with the mission. First Sergeant Mattis Castillo was sitting in the back of a vehicle because my men were dead. My men are dead. My men are dead. My men are dead. My men are dead. I remember all the visions of carnage. And I remember how they used to fight to replay themselves in my mind over and over and over and over again. Right? It wasn't as a sign of weakness or that I couldn't handle it. I just couldn't walk down a grocery store cereal aisle anymore without watching somebody's head explode. It's not something that I did to not prepare myself. I was an airborne ranger, the most elite light infantryman in the world. I was better trained and would fight with all my might. Nobody could take me out. I was a rooster, right? There was nothing that said this would happen to me, that my head would become the place where butterflies cry. More than anything, though, what happened, which was the real trauma, is that I stopped believing in my worth as a human being. And I stopped believing in the worth of others. We, all of us, were no longer human beings. Just a pile of people. Nobody wanted to live in this world anyway, and that might be the reason why you get to go home. I just couldn't handle being the person who was and did the things that I did, and I couldn't handle the things that I had experienced myself. Anybody ever deal with a situation where they think back and like, man, I really hurt that person. I wish I could have done something differently. Well, this is that on an epic scale. I give you all this information because it leads up to the deadliest mission that I've ever been on. On January 24, 2004, I was involved in what's called an urbanized operation. And what you need to understand about urbanized operations is that they're 4-dimensional, right? It's what's in front of you, what's behind you, what's to your left, what's to your right, what's happening underneath you, under the ground, what's happening on top of a rooftop, what's happening inside of a building, but then what's happening inside the person that's walking up to you, and what's happening inside of me, right? Everybody's on edge, all the spidey senses are kicking in. Urbanized operation, you really don't know what's going to happen on the other side of the door, at the corner of an intersection. Nobody can tell you what's going to happen. It's just all 1 second after another. Hey, look, I got another second. Hey, I got another second. Hey, I got another second. Hey, I didn't die that time. Hey, I didn't die that time. Cool. And this operation that I was on was a small unit operation where myself and my ranger buddy got split from everybody else, which is normal for rangers. As long as there's 2 of you, actually as long as there's 1 of you according to our ranger creed, that's a really bad thing if there's only 1 of you. As long as there's 2 of you, you just keep moving, right? And so we were clearing a building, and everything about clearing a building that you need to know is that it requires speed, violence of action, and situational awareness. Right? You make the presence know as soon as that door opens, you clear it. And you do it in a very, very violent way so that whoever's in the other room next door doesn't want to fight you. They're just dreading in anticipation of you coming to their door. They're hiding. Right? They're wetting themselves knowing that rangers are coming in. Speed and violence of action. And situational awareness is one of those things where there used to be a time when if I walked in a room like this, I would have already counted my pace from that door to this stage, and then started thinking how long it would take me to get to that door and all these other exits, and I would have already paid attention to who's sitting how and who I might have to climb over to get out of here if I needed to. And what if somebody did walk into this room? There used to be a time when I would have a plan for that if they had a gun. Everybody else would be screaming and getting down on their tables, and I'd be running towards them. Right? But on January 24, 2004, my ranger buddy and I, we cleared this little room. We were getting ready to come out into the street. And he was the number one man, which means that he was already stacked in the door. So he's just kind of sitting there, and he waits for me to come in behind him, push into him, and then he pushes back into me, and then we launch out into the street. And we fight whatever might be in the street. Pretty simple. And that's exactly what happened, except that as he went out in the street, and I came out after him, I completely lost him. Situational awareness shot. Gone. See, the problem with this is that now whoever I see next, if I raise my weapons, it could be my buddy. And if I don't raise my weapons, it could be the enemy. This is a life and death situation. This isn't just like, hey, I wonder where he went. I wonder if he's having a snack today, or maybe he's taking a break. No, this was like, I could potentially die or kill my buddy right now. And then the first figure that shows up is at about the 1 o'clock position on the face of a clock. And it's an individual who already has a pistol pointed at me. And I'm thinking, man, I've never had to drop on me like this before. I remember gripping my weapons. And I remember trying to posture, and I started yelling, right? Because I have the rest of my airborne ranger career to get out of this mess. And I started yelling and yelling and yelling in any language that I remember how to say, get back, agaf, imbata. Anything I could, right? Anything I could, any language that I remembered. And nothing was working, but something was really odd. This individual hadn't shot me yet. If it was me back then, I would have already taken me down. This would have been over. Continue with mission. Let's go on with life. This guy must have been new. We used to call him cherries. Brand new, right? And he was moving backwards. I'm like, who the heck moves backwards? I don't understand what's happening. I was confused. And as he's moving backwards, I start thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have an advantage here soon. And then I'll ghost this guy, go find my buddy, reunite with my unit, and be done with this horrible, horrible day. And then tell everybody I lost my situational awareness. I need retraining. But he kept moving backwards, and then he tripped over a curb. It's like, how do you not know where you are? I was like, this isn't normal. And as he fell to the ground, I remember this feeling like something hit me in the back of the head. It just hurt, right? Like right there where the brainstem is what I imagine, right? It just hurt. I felt nauseous. I felt like I was going to lose bowel control. And I looked at him, and it felt like it was one of those like scenes in Saving Private Ryan, right? Where like, you know, the corporal's going up the stairs, the American and Germans coming down the stairs, and they kind of look at each other, they nod at each other, and they just keep moving, and nobody has to die, right? Well, like maybe in that black and white movie, I don't know if you remember it, right? But the Allies are on one side, and the Germans on the other side, and then it's Christmas Eve, and they, for whatever reason, decide they're not going to fight that day, and then they're all singing Silent Night and eating like chocolate bars, and these big white fluffy snowflakes come out of the sky, and that's how the movie ends, right? A big white fluffy snowflake moment. I thought maybe this was one of those big white fluffy snowflake moments. But it wasn't. That thing in the back of my head hit me again. I remember looking to my left, and there was an image of what I believed to be my, at the time, 1.5-year-old son. Really twisted. Shook my head again, and I heard yelling to my right. And it sounded like my ex-wife yelling. What's going on? And then I looked down in front of me, and I realized that I was surrounded by police officers. It was Lakeville, Minnesota. It wasn't where I thought I was. And I had 2 revolvers in my hands. I was experiencing the worst dissociative flashback I had ever experienced in my life. And the cops, for whatever reason, realized this. Something isn't right here. This guy is yelling at us in different languages. The guy that responded to the call was an individual, was a police officer, was an Air Force TAC D, which means that he ordered jets to fly into villages and destroy them. And he would be attached to Rangers, and he got the call while he was sitting in a park saying, God, if there's anything worth living for, give it to me now, because I'm going to kill myself. And then came the call. We have a Ranger, we have a veteran in distress, domestic in progress. And it was 2 blocks away from where he was, getting ready to kill himself. And he's the one that responded at my 1 o'clock. Tell me God's not in that, right? They didn't kill me. It would have been a justified shoot. Nobody would have ever said to these cops, I was wrong. Nobody. But then nobody would get to hear the story of healing. Believe it or not, this was what I needed for healing. I remember that night, I didn't know how to surrender weapons, but I started thinking, maybe I should surrender these. Right? Except that nobody taught me how to surrender my weapons. I used to kid around and say that the day that they taught us in the military how to surrender our weapons was the same day that they were given a class on how to ask for help, and I missed that day completely. I was on leave or whatever, I just wasn't there. I didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't know how to surrender my weapons. I wasn't trained to surrender my weapons. Uncle Sam doesn't want me surrendering my weapons. So there I was, trying to think of every single possible way to do something I've never done before. And I remember throwing my weapons and saying, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I threw my weapons, and then they kept yelling, throw your weapons down, throw your weapons down. I was like, oh no, I'm going to die. And so I just turned my hands to the back, tucked my chin in my chest, I spread my legs as far as I could, and I leaned forward until I fell into the snow. And I could smell the cortisol and adrenaline. Have you ever been able to smell cortisol and adrenaline? I could smell it coming off of these cops as they came on top of me. I could feel the cortisol pumping through their muscles and how hard everything was, just the movements, everything was tense. And I remember my breath in the snow. I'm like, wow, that's the deepest I've been breathing in a long time, or even remember me breathing. I don't remember myself breathing. I remember being picked up to my knees, and then picked up to my feet and brought in the car. And about half an hour later, the police officer, a different one, come in and saying, Hector, what's so different about you right now than before? I said, I don't know, sir. Well, what do we need to do about that, Hector? I need to die, sir. I've become a monster. We're not going to let that happen, Hector. I can't let you die. I almost killed this guy, and he can't let me die. Years later, as I was speaking to another group of nurses, a nurse comes up, she's like, I was the VA nurse that took the phone call from the police officer, but we couldn't accept you. We had no protocol for anything like this. You're too dangerous to bring him. We wouldn't know what to do with you. But the police officer would not take that as an answer. He said, no, I'm bringing him there, and you're going to do something with him. We couldn't do anything with you, Hector. But he totally advocated for you. Said, this guy really needs help. There's nothing in this guy's prior. There's nothing that we can see that would cause this guy to do this. Everything we know about him, he's a hero. We don't understand what's happening. He doesn't need to go to jail. He needs to come to you. The same police officer, while I was yet his enemy, loved me. And I remember sitting in a group, a peer-to-peer support group, telling these stories about my past in the military, and more like a war story than the way that I told it tonight. And one of the veterans in there, Vietnam veteran, said, yeah, brother, I know exactly what you're talking about. See, I was once reaching up to pull a star straight out of the sky, not realizing I was just pushing dirt back into my own grave where I was living on my belly, like you. And when I think about that, yeah, the first step that I ever took towards healing was after a police officer picked me up, walked me to the car, dropped me off at Dakota County Jail, and told everybody, this guy's a veteran. He needs to be treated right. And I was thinking, man, just put me with the hardest dudes, and I'll find somebody who needs to prove himself. That's all I wanted. I put me by myself. And I remember this chaplain that came to visit me was a good friend of mine. I met him on active duty right after I left the Ranger Regiment. And he visited me, and my mom must have called him, to be honest with you. It had to be somebody that we knew. And he came, and he said, looking at me in that moment, he said, Ranger, you can only lead as far as you've gone. And once you find your way out of this hell, you have to go back and get others out. I didn't want to hear that from him. I didn't want another mission. My mission was to die. Not long after that, the court gave me mercy, and I remember the judge looking at me and saying, young man, you need to exercise your demons. May God help you. And I remember going to a therapist after a couple others had failed. I just couldn't handle some of the environments, couldn't handle the groups, couldn't handle being anywhere except for like one-on-one. It needed to be a dark place. It needed to be somewhere where I have the control of the room. And This one guy at the Veterans Resource Center, the walk-in counseling centers, Dr. Boswell, said, come see me. We'll talk 3 times a week. I didn't know that that was not normal. I'm like, sure, we could talk 3 times a week. And as I was just dumping everything on him, because I had a suicide plan, he stopped one day, and I remember he used to take his shoes off. And so the session would begin, he'd take his shoes off there, he would be barefoot, put his feet into the ground. I know that that would freak Dr. Bachman out, but there he was, barefoot, and he puts his clipboard down and everything, and he says, Hector, remember that I'm saying this today. It's not going to make sense to you right now. But you'll remember that I said this. You will be a better man because of this. And yeah, he was right. At the time, I just was like, man, you have no idea what I'm doing, do you? Of course he did. He's one of the individuals that wrote my letter to get into grad school. And so was the chaplain. That's when I knew that I was on a new beginning. And John O'Donohue, in another blessing, wrote, in out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you are ready to emerge. For a long time it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness grow inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety, and the great promises that sameness whispered. It heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, and wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground. Your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not clear, you can trust the promise of this opening, unfurling itself into the grace of beginning that is one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure, hold nothing back, learn to find ease and risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Albert Schweitzer, theologian, Nobel Peace Prize winner in 1952, once said that at times in our life, our inner fire is burnt out, and it is then rekindled by an encounter with another human being. And we should be thankful for those encounters with those who rekindle our inner fire. Inner fire, of course, means courage. I remember going to watch these movies about superheroes. Remember Christopher Reeve, Superman? Oh, man, he will always be Superman to me, period. Right? I mean, the way that he lived life. And I remember watching him get pummeled by the bad guys, and watching the rubble come over him. And then everything goes quiet, right? Like the whole battle stops just because Superman isn't fighting anymore. He's buried in a building. And even the bad guys come to walk and almost lament for a little bit, like, I can't get this over, right? I mean, Lex Luthor was his best friend in a way. And I remember that it wasn't everything that led up to that we went for. I didn't go watch Superman because I wanted to see some special effects and a dude in a red cape. No, this was the moment I came for. When the individual is covered in rubble, and there's silence, and the whole world stops for a second. It's Friday. And then we just sit there, and Saturday's coming, and then all of a sudden it begins to stir. Look. And out of the ashes comes a resurrected individual. It's Sunday. It was a look moment that I went to the movies for. That's what I was there to do. And as I grew older, I wasn't any Superman, I wasn't any superhero. But I taught people how to fly. I was no savior. I hated hearing that you were thankful for my service. I hated you for loving me. I wanted to hate God, but I just knew. I knew this wasn't his doing. I avoided the truth. This is my doing. Abba, please forgive me. For we don't know what we're doing. To each other, to our creation, in general, forgive us, Father, for our greed, ignorance, and willfulness. Make us new. And that's what I was. That's what I will always be. Forgiven. The biggest thing that I have avoided. Redemption. You know what a hero is? A hero is someone who reminds you that you were born to fly. A hero reminds you that you are worthy, you are loved, and you belong. Not because I say so, but because God, the Creator, says so. I am a strong believer that we can either choose the path of acceptance or the path of avoidance. I believe that you could be free, but without taking responsibility for that freedom and falling into that guilt for too long, the pathological guilt that leads into shame, that leads into depression, you continue to avoid. But when you enter the crucible, you realize that I'm here because of the crucible. That my identity will be refined as a result of it. And then as a result of that, I have to reconcile myself. Mercy, grace, and redemption, restoration is mine. I can claim that boldly. And then my heart explodes, and I can be empathetic towards others. Then I can love even those who are seemingly unlovable, like Sergeant Maddie was, January 24, 2004. Then I can make the world of others bigger, and I can help them be responsible for their freedom. I can help them realize their refined identity. I can help them make the world of others bigger. Father Gregory Boyle, in a book called Tattoos on the Heart, describes it best. By the way, he's a Jesuit priest. There is no daylight to separate us. There's only kinship. Inching ourselves closer to creating a community of kinship such that God might recognize it. And soon we imagine with God this circle of compassion. Then we imagine no one standing outside of that circle, moving ourselves closer to the margins so that the margins themselves will be erased. We stand with those whose dignity has been denied. We locate ourselves with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless. And at the edges, we join the easily despised and the ready to left out. We stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. We situate ourselves right next to their disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. The prophet Habakkuk writes, the vision still has its time. The presence on the fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, wait for it. And so here we are, listening to the story of one of us that's been through the crucible, and as a result of that crucible and what God did within it, I get to motivate and inspire you to a new beginning today. A refreshed look at your work, a renewed perspective for why you do what you do. I got into this work to do trauma work, specifically. I said, I'm going to do trauma work. And then I realized that everything is based off of trauma and how you experience the world and your life. I know that everyone walking into that door is struggling with how they have physically changed their view of their world, and in one way or another are avoiding the fullness of the abundant life that we've been promised. I know that trauma work can't be done without him. In fact, it can be done without me. I know that everyone in this room has encountered their own sense of trauma, their own form of trauma, and you're here because you're a survivor, right? The proof, the data suggests that because you're here, you've already survived 100% of everything that you've ever been through. Prove me wrong. At the end of the day, my job is to remind people, not because of my will, but because of his will, that they are worthy. They are loved. They belong. All of which are things in the present moment, an acceptance of this present day, in the very presence of God who created them. So I have one more traumatic exercise for my introvert brothers and sisters, and for the extroverts, it might be challenging as well, but I'd like for you to turn back to that same person and just take 30 seconds, right? Take turns, and this time I want you to tell them, look at them in the eye and tell them, you are worthy, you are loved, you belong, you were born to fly. Can you do that for me?
Write that down. Right sense of you are worthy. You are loved. You belong, and you were born to fly. Hey, you remember Marcus who worked with us for a little bit?
Thank you for doing that.
Michael's roommate.
Doesn't that bring you into a place of belonging? That was a little bit nicer, wasn't it? You got to be a superhero for a little bit. But remember that with great power comes great responsibility. For belonging, may you listen to your longing to be free. May the frames of your belonging be generous enough for your dreams. May you rise each day with a voice of blessing whispering in your heart. May you find a harmony between your soul and your life. May the sanctuary of your soul never become haunted. May you know the eternal longing that lives at the heart of time. May there be kindness in your gaze when you look within. May you never place walls between the light and yourself. May you allow the wild beauty of the invisible world to gather you, mind you, and embrace you in belonging. A friend of mine, as he farewells people, and I'm probably going to get it wrong. His wife is here, so she'll tell me later if I get it wrong. Tells people that, remember, if I don't see you again on the 4th, I think it's Wednesday of every month at about 4 p.m. on the east side of the Tree of Life, there'll be a great, big, huge party. And as he puts it, I can't wait to see you there. And I remember telling him one day, I'm like, I'm going to be a little bit late. And then he's like, what? See, because around the same time, there's this peer-to-peer support group on the west side of Tree of Life that I have to go to. And that's for anybody who's been on this planet and has suffered on this planet and needs their tears wiped away. So, to whichever one it is that you plan on going to, I'll see you there. Thank you.